Welcome, everybody. We are happy to have you join us for our first open day event for speech and audio. My name is Tara Keen. I'm one of the clinical educators in the speech therapy and audiology division in the health and rehab department at Health Sciences. I am happy to be introducing my colleague, Ms. Olabeng Mahuru, who is going to speak to us about what it may involve to study speech therapy and audiology at UCT and share some information with you all. Afterwards, we will have a question and answer period. So I will hand over to Olabeng.
Thank you, Tara. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for taking time to be with us today. So here's what you can expect from our presentation. I will give an overview of what speech and language pathology is. And I will also give an overview of audiology. And each of the overviews will include information on the scope of practice, the context in which we work, as well as what our students and graduates have to say about each of our programs. I will also give information on how you can become a speech language pathologist or audiologist. So what is speech and language pathology? Speech and language pathology is also referred to as speech and language therapy, and it's a profession that deals with assessing and managing communication disorders that are caused by speech and or language breakdowns. What do we do? As speech and language pathologists, we work with people of different ages. So we can work with babies who are just a few days old, to adults, including senior citizens. We have a very wide scope of practice in that we treat various types of communication and swallowing disorders. And I will take you through some of the areas, or I'll take you through all the areas rather, in which we work. So I'll start with speech. Someone with a speech difficulty or a speech disorder will have difficulty producing or pronouncing certain speech sounds or putting sounds together to form words. So an example of someone with a speech disorder is someone who has a lisp. The next area is language. So language refers to how well we understand what we read, as well as how well we understand what we hear. Language can also refer to, or language also refers to how well we use words in order to share our thoughts with others. So people with language disorders or language difficulties experience difficulties in understanding others when spoken to. They might also have difficulties getting their messages across. So you can imagine the frustration if you try to communicate and others aren't able to understand what you are saying. And this often results in the people who experience language disorders or difficulties to withdraw. It also may result in isolation, and this in turn leads to exclusion of individuals with language disorders from everyday conversations. So a child who experiences language difficulty may have great difficulties in forming and maintaining friendships at school. So they might be excluded from certain activities during break time. And then in terms of the adult population, adults may experience difficulties in communicating or taking part in everyday conversations, as well as being part of important things within the household, such as decision making. And then the next area is fluency, and the most common fluency disorder includes stuttering. And stuttering can affect children, adolescents, and adults. And those with stuttering, especially children and adolescents, often experience bullying. And bullying we also see children with speech disorders as well as language difficulties or disorders. They also often experience bullying at the school. And then the next area is voice. So voice refers to the ways in which we use our voices. Someone with a voice disorder or voice difficulty may have a hoarse voice, or they may lose their voice easily. Now, if you think about people who rely on their voices, we rely on our voices for different purposes, but someone who relies on it to make a living. So for example, a teacher, a sportscaster, or even a radio broadcaster, if they easily lose their voice on an everyday basis, it can become quite tricky for them to actually be able to do their work. And then the next area is literacy. Now, literacy refers to the ways in which we read and write. And there's a lot of research that has been done, and many people with communication disorders may also experience difficulties with reading and writing. And if you think in terms of the child who is still developing, the child who experiences communication disorders, and they aren't managed early on, will have great difficulty in doing well at school. So, and not doing well at school will obviously exclude them from a lot of opportunities as they grow older. And then the next area so the next area includes social communication. And social communication involves following rules in which we communicate with different people and within different contexts. So during a conversation, someone with poor social communication skills may have difficulty participating in communication exchanges, in that they might end up, for example, giving answers not related to the conversation being had, or they might also tell stories that actually don't make much sense to their communication partners. And then the last area is feeding and swallowing. Now, feeding and swallowing skills involves a ability to suck, chew, as well as swallow food and liquids. And someone with a feeding and swallowing disorder or difficulty is at a great risk for poor nutrition, as well as other health-related issues. Okay, and we also help to set up alternative communication systems for individuals who are actually not able to speak. So on this slide, I have two pictures. One picture is an example of an alternative communication system that is, so it's quite advanced and it involves technology, while the other one is what we call a low-tech alternative communication system. And it includes just a very simple communication book. And so just moving on to the impact on the quality of life, communication difficulties, as well as feeding and swallowing difficulties, can actually negatively impact the quality of lives of the individuals who experience such difficulties. And as I've already mentioned in the previous slides, we may see the individuals withdrawing, isolating, and being excluded from taking part in everyday activities. For example, some children may also be bullied at school. And then if you think about something that I also mentioned previously is the long-term impact that speech and language difficulties may actually have on the academic development if the child is not given, or if the child is not provided with speech and language therapy, especially early on. And then where do we work as speech and language therapists? Based on the wide scope of practice, we can work in different we can work in different contexts. So for example, in the preschool context, so the earlier we can identify a child who has communication difficulties, the better, because then the better chances for the child to actually do better at school, and then they have a better chance in succeeding as adults. We can also work in mainstream schools, and we also often work in schools that accommodate learners with special educational needs. So such schools will include schools for children on the autism spectrum, or schools for children with Down syndrome, for example. And then we can work in hospitals and rehabilitation centers, so in both public and the private sector. So there's quite a number of opportunities. And then we can also work in community clinics, or if you want to go into your own private practice, you can also work there. And lastly, we, as a speech and language therapist or a speech and language pathologist, you can work in an institution of higher learning. So for example, where you'll be involved in research related to the work that we do, as well as training future speech and language therapists and audiologists. And then one of the great things about the work we do, as well as where we work, is that you always become part of a team, so that your clients are seen or get holistic management. And then this is just to end off for speech and language pathology, and I'll read to you what one of our graduate has said. So she says, I initially chose to study speech language pathology because I wanted to help children and adults with communication problems. However, as time passed, I discovered, and this was in third year of undergraduate, that speech language pathology is not only about language delays, language disorders, and speech difficulties. Speech language pathology is multifaceted in the sense that it ranges from helping patients with voice difficulties to treating patients with swallowing difficulties after undergoing cardiac surgery. Hence, I realized that I could work in various settings such as mainstream schools, special needs schools, acute hospitals, and even rehabilitation centers. By the time I decided that I wanted to do my master's, by the time I graduated in 2014, I realized that I had a special interest in pediatric dysphagia. Pediatric dysphagia is feeding and swallowing disorders in children. And from there, I decided that I wanted to do my master's at UCT. Why? Because UCT has the best pediatric dysphagia specialist in the country. And this is a speech and language graduate, Cynthia Sibanda. And then the next one. So that's speech and language therapy. I hope I have given you a good idea of what speech and language therapy involves. And I will move on to audiology. So what is audiology? Audiology is a branch of science that studies hearing balance as well as related disorders. What do audiologists do? So audiologists assess and manage hearing and balance disorders. They promote healthy ear and hearing habits. They prevent or minimize disability that is caused by hearing loss or balance disorders. They provide rehabilitative services to children and adults with a hearing loss. And they also fit hearing aids and assistive devices, which you can see on the picture on the slide. Here's more information on what audiologists do. So audiologists also consult on issues concerning noise-induced hearing loss, and they help to develop hearing conservation programs. So areas in which issues concerning noise-induced hearing loss are addressed include certain working places. So for example, in mines, in some factories, as well as at construction sites where workers are exposed to a lot of noise during the day, because that can cause hearing loss eventually. Audiologists also manage communication difficulties that are related to hearing loss. They also manage individuals with auditory processing difficulties, and they also manage people with ear-related balance problems. Okay, and then in the next slide, I'm just going to play you a short video clip of a child who had just been fitted with a hearing aid. And I just need to indicate that we obtained consent for us to share this video with you.
Let's see. Mason, hi. Can you hear me? Hi, baby. Hi. You can hear me? Yeah. Good job. Yeah, you can hear me. Yeah. Hi. Can you say hi? No. Do you like that? Do you like how everything sounds? Yeah. Yeah.
And I hope that short clip. So where do audiologists work? Like speech and language therapists or speech and language pathologists, audiologists can work in both the private sector as well as the public sector. And this includes hospitals as well as clinics, or if you want to go into your own private practice. And then you can also work in sales, and you can also work in research. So you can be part of the teaching team, as well as conduct research that is related to the work that you do as an audiologist in South Africa. And then in the next 3 slides, I will just read some of the things or testimonials from some of our students. So just to give you an idea of what they think about the program. So one student, S. Fuchani, who's a 4th year audiology student. So she'll be completing her degree this year. She says, in first year, we were tasked to job shadow audiologists in clinical settings. I remember my first day observing. The very first patient was a child with tonsillitis, who had tonsillitis a few months before. I remember the audiologist explaining to her mother that her tonsillitis may have caused the hearing loss, and how distraught they were upon hearing that. I could not escape the shock, the overwhelming confusion, and a rude awakening they felt as their lives were about to change because of that diagnosis. Then walked in the next patient I would be observing, a toddler due for a hearing aid fitting. The joy on his face upon hearing his mother's voice for what would be the first time was enough to paint color on what was my very grim view of the world. From that day onwards, I learned that our healthcare system will cause you heartache because there's so much injustice in the world. However, I also learned that I'm not just a diagnostician. I do not just bear bad news. I'm also there to reduce the impact of ear-related diseases and improve people's quality of life. There was a quote we heard from one of our clinical educators: fixing problems you didn't know you had. Being an audiologist is one of the most fulfilling careers you could ever choose. It is amazing to be part of someone's rehabilitation, seeing them achieve greater heights in their communication, and knowing you have been there from the assessment stage to reaching maximum potential. Here's another one. So another audiology student who's also in her final year, his or her final year, says, to say that applying for audiology was probably one of the best choices in my life would be an understatement. Prior to studying audiology, I did not realize the true extent to which hearing and communication impacted our daily living. So to be able to help the patients who we see in our clinics and to witness the visible joy on their faces when they hear something that they haven't heard in a while is truly priceless. I vividly remember the day I witnessed a child getting fitted with a hearing aid for the first time. She was profoundly deaf and used sign language as a primary mode of communication. And when that hearing aid was fitted, I instantly saw her face light up with excitement. At that moment, my heart felt so full, and I was forced to hold back my tears, but that was also a defining moment for me. I knew I was passionate and genuinely loved what I was doing. And then here's the last one. My time at UCT has taught me so many things about life and has really expanded my thinking. I have been exposed to so many different experiences and learning opportunities in this faculty. And a lot of what I have learned over the past 4 years has shaped who I am today and who I strive to be in the future. I learned about being an empathic, person-centered clinician, as much as I learned about the theory of hearing aids or any other theory for that matter. And that is one of the things that really stands out for me. The fact that this faculty not only encourages us to excel in our academic careers, but also to excel as human beings and to excel at our ability to treat other human beings with dignity. And this is from a final year audiology student. So here's some information on how you can become a speech and language therapist or audiologist. So it's a 4-year degree and it's followed by a year of community service. During the year of community service, you have to work for the National Department of Health. And then following the community service year, you will be certified as an independent practitioner. And you can, of course, continue with postgraduate studies after your 4 years of study and get a master's and doctoral degree in speech and language therapy or audiology because there are so many great opportunities for research and for improving service delivery once you graduate. Thank you. And I hope I have given you information. We'll just go through questions if there are any. Okay, there aren't any questions. So thank you so much for your time. And I hope to see some of you in our program, or all of you in our program next year. Thank you.